I remember standing on that graduation stage, the lights bright, the crowd loud, and my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I tried to look confident, tried to smile. But the moment I turned toward the audience, everything inside me froze. 4 seats. 4 seats with my family's name on them. All completely empty. I kept scanning the crowd, hoping maybe they were just late. Maybe they were stuck in traffic. Maybe they cared enough to show up for me just this once. But as more names were called and more families cheered, the truth hit me like a punch in the chest. They weren't coming. They chose not to come. While everyone else had their parents waving, crying, celebrating, I had silence. A cold, heavy silence that sat right on top of my heart. As I walked across the stage, smiling for the camera, one painful thought kept repeating in my head over and over. They really didn't care enough to be here. But I didn't know something bigger was coming. Because 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. A letter that exposed everything, and flipped the power dynamic in my family forever. Growing up in my house always felt like trying to shout through a closed door. No matter what I did, no matter how hard I tried, it was never enough to get their attention. If I brought home good grades, they barely looked up. If I won something at school, they said things like, "That's nice," and moved on. Everything I achieved somehow got overshadowed by my siblings. If my brother did something small, they acted like it was the biggest thing in the world. If my sister messed up, they made excuses for her. But when it came to me, I was the one expected to stay quiet and not ask for too much. Whenever I tried to share something I was proud of, the same line came back at me every time. "We're busy, don't make everything about you." It didn't matter if it was a school project I spent weeks on, or an award I worked so hard to earn. Their reactions never changed. Over time, I learned to keep my excitement to myself. I learned to clap for myself in silence. And deep down, a small part of me hoped that maybe one day, they would finally notice me. The day before my graduation, I tried to remind my family in the most gentle way possible. I mentioned the time, the location, even asked if they needed directions. I wasn't asking for gifts or a celebration. I just wanted them there. They nodded, barely listening, and said things like, yeah, we'll see," as if attending my biggest milestone was optional. My mom said she might come if she didn't feel tired. My dad said he had a lot going on, but he'd try. My siblings didn't even bother pretending, they just shrugged. But later that evening, I walked past the living room and overheard them planning something completely different. A family lunch. A casual get-together. On the exact same day and time as my ceremony. They were laughing and discussing who would bring what. Nobody mentioned my graduation. Nobody even remembered the time I told them. And even if they did, they clearly didn't care. The line that cut deepest came from my dad, spoken so casually it almost sounded harmless. "It's just a college ceremony. Why should we waste a whole day?" I stood there quietly, realizing that I had spent my whole life begging for presents from people who couldn't even give me a single hour. And yet, I still hoped they would show up. Graduation day arrived and I tried to calm the storm inside my chest. I kept telling myself not to expect too much. But a small part of me still wished they would walk in at the last moment. I kept checking my phone all morning, hoping for a message like, "We're on our way." But nothing came. When I reached the auditorium, they handed me the program and pointed out the row where my family would sit. 4 seats. Reserved with our last name written clearly on them. I stared at those empty chairs longer than I should have, convincing myself they were just late. Maybe traffic was bad. Maybe they forgot the parking directions. Maybe they cared, just enough to try. But as the ceremony began and names were called, those seats stayed painfully empty. Every time someone's family stood up to cheer, it felt like the sound echoed straight through me. My classmates were waving at their parents, blowing kisses, smiling into cameras. I kept pretending I didn't notice my empty row. Pretending it didn't matter. Pretending I wasn't breaking inside. By the time my name was called, I forced a smile so hard my cheeks hurt. The applause from strangers felt loud, but their silence felt louder. It was in that moment I finally understood. They never planned to come. After the ceremony ended, everyone around me was celebrating, taking pictures, hugging their families, holding flowers, laughing through tears. I walked out of the auditorium alone, holding the folder with my diploma like it was the only thing keeping me from falling apart. The bus ride home felt longer than usual, even though it was the same route I took every day. I sat by the window, still in my graduation gown, replaying the image of those 4 empty seats over and over. Every bump in the road reminded me of how heavy my chest felt. When I walked through the front door, nobody even looked up. My mom was scrolling through her phone, my dad was watching TV, and my siblings were arguing about something pointless. It was like I never left. Like today hadn't meant anything at all. My dad glanced at me for half a second and said, "Oh, you're back? No, congratulations." "No, how was it?" "Nothing." I sat down at the table, still in full graduation attire, and ate leftovers in silence. No one asked why I was quiet. No one noticed my swollen eyes. Then someone casually said, "Don't be dramatic. There will be other events." And that was the moment something inside me changed. Not suddenly, but loudly enough for me to hear it. I deserved better. A week passed after graduation and I tried to focus on moving forward, but the hurt sat quietly in my chest. I stopped bringing up the ceremony because every time I hinted at it, someone rolled their eyes or acted like I was overreacting. So I went silent. Then one afternoon something unusual happened. A letter arrived in the mail, thick, official-looking, with my name written neatly on the front. I wasn't expecting anything important, so for a moment, I wondered if it was a mistake. Before I could even open it, my brother laughed and said, "Probably some random advertisement." My mom mumbled, "Throw it away if it's useless." But something about the envelope felt different. Heavy. Important. My hands shook a little as I opened it. The first page had a large emblem at the top and a bold title that instantly made my breath catch. I didn't say anything, but my face must have changed, because suddenly everyone was paying attention. "What is it?" my sister asked, sounding curious for the first time in years. I didn't answer right away. My eyes kept scanning the first paragraph, trying to process the words. The room grew quiet, so quiet I could hear my heartbeat. And in that silence I realized this letter wasn't ordinary. It was life-changing. As I read the letter, my eyes kept returning to the same sentence, like my brain couldn't fully believe it. I had been selected for a prestigious program, one I applied to months ago and assumed I had no chance of getting. It was competitive, international, and only a handful of people were chosen each year. They were offering me a fully funded opportunity. Everything covered. My education, my travel, my living expenses, my future. I kept shaking my head, rereading the words just to make sure I wasn't imagining it. My hands were trembling so much that the paper made soft rustling sounds in the quiet room. Then I reached a paragraph that made my heart stop completely. The selection committee had been present at the graduation ceremony. They had attended in person to observe candidates and see the support systems around them. And in the letter they mentioned me specifically. How they noticed I stood alone. How they saw 4 empty seats reserved with my family's name. How they watched me walk across the stage with no one cheering, yet still holding my head high. The letter said my resilience stood out. My determination. My ability to succeed without applause. For the first time in my life, someone saw my loneliness and didn't use it against me. They valued it. The moment I finished reading the letter, I could feel every pair of eyes in the room glued to me. A minute earlier they were laughing, distracted, uninterested. Now the atmosphere felt completely different. Tight, tense, almost uncomfortable. My mom was the first to break the silence. "What does it say?" she asked, suddenly sounding gentle. Too gentle. I placed the letter on the table. My dad leaned forward, reading the bold lines, and his expression changed instantly. My siblings, who never cared about anything I did, were suddenly trying to peek over my shoulder. My brother asked, "So, you got selected? Like, for real?" My sister added, "This is huge. Why didn't you tell us you applied?" I almost laughed. I had told them months ago. They just didn't remember. Or maybe they never listened. Now they were full of excitement, acting like they'd always supported me. My dad even said, "We always knew you'd make us proud." The same man who didn't show up for my graduation. They began asking questions nonstop. When the program started, if they could help, if there would be an award ceremony they could attend. Their voices were filled with sudden pride, but it felt forced, like they were trying to rewrite history in real time. For the first time, I didn't feel grateful for their attention. I felt distant, strangely calm. Because deep down I knew their sudden interest had nothing to do with me, and everything to do with what the letter could bring them. As I kept reading the letter, I noticed a second page tucked behind the first. It looked more personal, handwritten by the fellowship director. I unfolded it slowly and the room fell silent again. The letter explained why they had chosen me. Not just because of my grades or my application or my experience, but because of something they witnessed themselves. The director wrote about sitting in the audience during the ceremony. They saw the empty seats reserved for my family. They saw me standing alone while others were surrounded by support. They saw me smile through the silence even though no one clapped for me. And then I read the line that shook me the most. Success is not measured by how loudly others celebrate you, but by how boldly you rise when no one stands beside you. My breath caught. I read it twice, then a third time, because no one had ever spoken to me like that. No one had ever acknowledged the quiet battles I fought, the loneliness I carried, or the strength it took to keep going anyway. For the first time in my life, someone outside my family had seen everything they ignored. And instead of calling me dramatic or needy, they called me resilient. The truth hit me deeper than any applause ever could. The room grew tense as my family realized the full weight of the letter. My mom stammered, Can we come to the awards ceremony?" My dad's voice shook slightly, "We should have been there. We can fix this." My siblings hovered, suddenly desperate to be included, asking every detail about the program. I looked at them calmly, feeling a quiet strength I had never felt before. "It's invitation only," I said softly, "and my guest slot is already taken." For the first time, I wasn't pleading for attention. For the first time, they had to wait. After the letter, everything changed. I realized my life, my achievements, and my future didn't depend on my family's approval. Their panic and sudden attention no longer mattered. As I packed for the fellowship, I felt calm and strong, finally free from the weight of years spent seeking validation. They asked to attend events, tried to insert themselves into my success, but I politely declined. For the first time, I understood. My real graduation wasn't the ceremony or applause. It was claiming my own success, standing tall for myself, and moving forward without needing anyone else to see me. Before leaving for the fellowship, I left one final message for my family. It wasn't angry, it was clear and honest. You didn't come to see me succeed. You ignored the moment that mattered most to me. Don't expect to be part of the success you didn't support. For years, I had craved their approval, letting their neglect sting. Now I realized the only validation I needed was my own. The real graduation wasn't the ceremony, the gown, or the applause. It was finally believing in myself, stepping into my future, and leaving behind those who never showed up.